Hi there, and welcome to the Skylight Books author reading series. If you'd like to learn more about us and our many upcoming author events, please visit skylightbooks.com, where you can browse our inventory, buy books, and join our Friends with Benefits Club. You can also follow us on Twitter, Tumblr, and Facebook. To speak to a real live bookseller like me, please call 323-660-1175. Thanks for your support, and enjoy.
We are celebrating Bruce Holbert's new novel, Whiskey. It's the story of two brothers, their parents, and 3 wrecked marriages, a searching book about family life at its most distressed, about kinship, failure, enough liquor to get through it all, and ultimately a dark and hard-earned grace. Bruce Holbert is a graduate of the University of Iowa's workshop. His work has appeared in the Iowa Review, Hotel America, Other Voices, the Antioch Review, Crab Creek Review, and the New York Times. Joining us tonight in conversation with Bruce following the reading is Elizabeth McCracken. She is the author of 5 books, the story collections Here's Your Hat, What's Your Hurry, and Thunderstruck and Other Stories, the novels The Giant's House and Niagara Falls All Over Again, and the memoir An Exact Replica of a Figment of My Imagination. She lives in Austin, Texas, where she holds the James A. Michener Chair in Fiction at the University of Texas. We're delighted to have them both here tonight to read and discuss whiskey. Please help me welcome Bruce Holbert and Elizabeth McCracken.
Thank you. I want my wife to take a picture of this thing because this will likely be the only time that you'll see my name in capital letters and Elizabeth's name in small letters. And, I realize that that's inverted, and I can sort of enjoy it for a few minutes at least. I want to thank Elizabeth, who has been friend and muse and also sort of a, you know those electrical things they use on cattle to get them to move? She's definitely understands how those things work too. I'm not sure that between her and my wife, I'm not sure that I would have finished this book if it wasn't for her saying, yeah, but what about whiskey? And so it, I'm really grateful. I'm really grateful to see friends and former students, and hopefully new friends here. One of the wonderful things about these events is that independent bookstores are, everybody talks about the evil empire of Amazon. Independent bookstores are communities, and books like my book, which are books that really rely on word of mouth, because there's no superheroes or zombies in them. They rely on conversation, and the fact that you're here and willing to engage in that conversation is, never doubt how much importance that has for writers. Whiskey is a book that started out as a collection. It started out as a single story, and then I had friends who said, those guys are kind of interesting. You should write more about those. And so they cropped up as other stories. Pretty soon I thought, okay, this is a book of linked stories. And then pretty soon I thought, no, they're linked too close to be linked stories. This is a novel. And it just went through several evolutions. But it's a story about a family, and mostly 2 brothers and their wives, and their mother and father. And I think to call them dysfunctional is sort of, gilding the lily a little bit. They love each other, and through the process of loving each other, they completely screw each other up. And my experience is that that's not completely unusual in families. There are three sections of the book. One section is sort of the old family history, which has to do with the father and the mother. One section is it's a more sort of recent history of the two brothers, and then one section is a story of the two brothers going to look for one of the brothers' daughters, who the mother has taken off, and she's not any more reliable than the rest of them. And so they go out on this venture to find Bird, which is the girl's name. Her name is Robin, but they call her Bird. But like most of the things in their lives, it's far from a straight line. So I'm just going to read a little bit, and then Elizabeth and she's going to ask me some questions I know I can't answer. And then I might read a little more, and then we'll talk. They're on the road here. They picked up a camper, which is my favorite part of the book cover. And they're headed to go find Sis. What happens when we find her? Andre asked. Well, we bring her home, Smoker said. To what? I know how to take care of her, Smoker told him. Andre drank his lukewarm coffee. Why'd you lose her then? Her mother is responsible. Andre chuckled and Smoker stayed quiet. You want Bird because she's yours, Andre said. You ought to want to look after her, and if you can't, you should hunt somebody who will. You don't know having children changes you, Smoker said. I don't believe it's changed you at all, Andre told him. I'm going to change, he said, once we get her home. Remember when she was a baby? I hauled her everywhere with me. Same can be said about a puppy, Andre said. Highway 2 sped them through little towns, each with a grocery, a tavern for the hands, a bank for the farmers, a crosswalk, and a school of the basketball team to argue over, along with gas, which everyone needed, so the price was $1 higher than in the cities. An hour later, the freeway dropped over Sunset Hill toward the city of Spokane. Maple was the first downtown exit, and Smoker signaled for it. They crossed the toll bridge and paid $0.25 in a basket. Andre pointed at the far bank. That's a damn big dog, Smoker replied. That's a bear. Sirens approached, and 3 police cruisers, lights tumbling, rushed over the bridge the opposite direction. They might know shoplifters, but they got bears wrong, Smoker said. How's that, Wild Kingdom? Bears don't like heights, Smoker said. They climb trees because they got something to hold on to. I can't imagine why he'd try a bridge once, but he ain't doubling back. Smoker directed the truck onto the gravel road that switched back twice and stopped where the bank bent steep as a blade. Their boot edges skidded as they scrambled the incline and clawed at the weeds and rocks to avert falling. At the riverbank, the salt blocks, mossy from the fall spray, formed a shelf that led to the water. Andre whacked an ankle and hobbled behind Smoker, who loped toward a locust copse. Halfway up one of the trees, a yearling black bear stared at them. The cops' blue lights lit a park on the river's other side where they searched the arcade and food trucks. A wind gust bent the gaunt tree. The bear scrambled for balance. Stayed put. Smoker said. Near the bear, Andre asked. Just watching, Smoker said. Smoker hiked from the canyon, 10 minutes later reappearing with a picnic ham, his rifle, a skinning knife, and 100 feet of nylon rope. Smoker sawed a tunnel under the ham bone, strung one rope end through and knotted the loop. He lobbed the ham at the bear and missed. The bear sniffed. Smoker tried again, but threw low. Quit throwing like a girl, Andre said. Smoker handed Andre the ham. Well, you Jim Thorpe it up there then. Andre clocked the bear in the head. It roared and batted the air. Andre flung the rope again and once more clouted the bear. It clung tighter to the tree. Smoker demanded the rope back. Go over that way a little and hoot, he ordered Andre. What? Hoot, Smoker said. Distracting, you mean? Hoot! Maybe it'll remind me in an hour. He forgotten flapped up there, you figure? Andre circled the tree toward the river. He cupped his hands and called. After a while, the bear gazed at him, querulous. Smoker sneaked closer and tossed the ham over a branch. Andre slowly replaced himself next to Smoker. The bear's eyes tracked him. When the rope entered the animal's sightline, Smoker tugged enough to rattle the leaves. The ham moved and the bear sniffed it and leaned forward. Smoker jerked the rope again. The bear tipped and tumbled from the tree. The ham landed nearby and the bear bit into it. Smoker tugged the meat from his mouth. It bellowed. Smoker shoved the rope at Andre and then scurried ahead. Lead him! Andre ascended slowly, not interested in antagonizing the animal. Don't let him catch hold of the food, Smoker said. Better it than me, Andre told him. Smoker hurried farther up, then traversed the steepest grade on all fours, much like the bear might have. He extended his hand for the rope. Andre threw it to him and followed, as did the bear, which managed better traction than the two men. It encircled both paws around the ham, and nearly took Smoker off his feet. Smoker yanked back and tore the meat from the bear's embrace. It sniffed again. Its rib bones expanded and faded under its loose skin. It rocked its woolly head. Wind rattled and clacked the ditch leaves. Above, passing cars sounded like the ocean in a seashell. The bear reversed himself for the river. Smoker poked his fingers between his lips and whistled. The bear's ears pricked. It plopped down, breathing heavy. Smoker unholstered the revolver looped into his belt. I was hoping to lead him to the rig and save us dragging. A few feet beneath him on the hill, Andre stood between the two. You aren't going to shoot this bear. Them cops give him a better odds? Smoker asked. Besides, I ain't slew a bear in 3 years. Smoker drew from a cigarette and exhaled. Andre scooted the meat down the grade to the bear. The bear flopped the ham, then rolled to his side and licked the salty fat. We could haul him, Andre told him. Smoker laughed. In the camper. Fool him up there just like we were doing. He'd tear it up and us with it. Andre shook his head. We'd keep him in feed. He'd just eat and shit and sleep. The bear ripped some meat from the bone and rolled like a dog. Smoker blew a breath into the sky. I didn't set out to rescue no bear. You're the one who steered the rig here, Andre told him. I was hoping for a little amusement. Well, Andre said, I ain't leaving that bear for them to shoot, and I ain't allowing you to shoot him. That don't leave too much. Jesus, Smoker said. Think we ought to get him laid too? The bear ends up continuing on with the group.
Yeah, bear's important.
He thinks he's important.
So Bruce, can I ask you some questions?
All right.
So
No math.
no math. We've been friends we met almost 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Like literally almost 30 years ago. And I feel like I'm the #1 Bruce Holbert fan in the nation for 30 years. And I love all of your work so much we went to graduate school together. From the first story of yours that I read in grad school, which I think was Disneyland.
Yeah.
To now, and this book is my favorite thing of yours that I've read. And one of the reasons why is because, I love your other work, but this book is very funny.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it's very dark, and it's funny. The narrative is funny. Like there's a description of a woman who looks like a legged ham.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of jokes that has to do with how the brothers talk to each other, and that's how they communicate is by making jokes to each other. And so I'd love to hear how you think about the place of humor in your fiction, but specifically in this book, what it's doing with the darkness that's also there.
Well, I think there's a couple of elements to it. You watch somebody fall down on the ice and it's funny until you realize they've broken their arm. And then it's not quite as funny. And I think this book sort of spends a lot of time on that edge.
Yeah.
And even the characters, they think it's funny, and then they realize it's not funny, but the only way to fix it is to try and be funny. And that's sort of, in some ways, it sort of divides the characters, because one of the characters is a little more serious than the other, and Smoker tends to give Andre a hard time about not having a sense of humor and taking things too seriously and not being able to let go of the things that cause him pain. The other thing is, I grew up in a world where men especially, but people in general distrust language. If you talk a lot, you might be a lawyer, and that is bad. And so, they would like you to grow up to be a lawyer. Your grandparents, you could be a lawyer, but then they also want you to move away. So people talk in a sort of code. They don't really say what they mean. They talk around it, and that tends to go all the way to grammar. They tend to truncate the language to the point where they'll get rid of things like prepositional phrases. I was reading in Grand Coulee, and people asked me about the language, and I said, my dad never uses prepositional phrases. I don't think he's ever stated a sentence that might require a semicolon. And he said, well, that's because I don't know what they are. And I said, well, yeah, but there's a lot of people who don't know what they are, but they still employ them. But it's that condensation, I think, has a lot to do with humor. It means everything is a punchline a little bit, or there's the potential for a punchline, and there's a bit of give and take between the characters, and it creates a kind of tension that is humorous. And then I think the other thing is the two brothers are, like a lot of brothers, they're irritants to one another, and they're loyal to each other, but they're also, envious of one another and pressing one another and sort of holding things over one another. So, I think that can be kind of funny. I remember when I was little, like really little, like 5 years old, my little brother was 3 years old, and my mom would put us down for naps. And my little brother hated naps. And so he would kick the wall, and my mom would come in and spank him. Then 5 minutes later, I would kick the wall. My mom would go in and spank my little brother again. And I thought that was funnier now. I don't think he thought it was funny. I mean, I remember not long after, like that evening we were eating dinner and he tried to eat my hand with his, stabbed it with a fork and tried to eat it. And my mother, "What are you doing?" And I said, "No, I think we're square now."
So you were talking earlier about how this book had been a bunch of different iterations and short stories, and I read it a long time ago as a short story collection. I told Bruce earlier that I so loved the short story collection that when Bruce said that it was going to be a novel, I was really worried before I read it that it had it wouldn't be the book that I remembered. And when I read it, it's everything that I loved about the short story collection. I loved, and then more. And I wonder how, when you work on something in a bunch of different forms, how you manage to shift it, because it's a completely different form now, and also connect to that, like how you keep the characters malleable so they can do what they need to do in a novel, even though they were short story characters beforehand.
Well, as far as keeping the characters malleable, the most important thing, and you know this, is stay out of their way. Let them do stuff that surprises you, because that's the best stuff. I do not make plans. Brian can attest to this. Kobe too. That I taught high school for 30 years, and 25 of them I made no lesson plans. I just showed. I figured, and it was because I understood that whatever I planned would be boring compared to what happened if I just showed up and with the students and we just started ham and egging it. And I recognized, okay, we're going to talk about this book or this story, but to plan something out too much just sucks the suspense from it. And so it's I think it was, you might correct me, but I think it was Yeats who said that Hamlet's the best play ever written, and the best part of Hamlet is what Shakespeare left out. And so I think that's part of it, is giving the characters their own room and leaving out explanation. That people don't go around explaining themselves, and that's part of what makes it interesting. As far as putting things together, I think that's a product of my life. I graduated from graduate school and went back to working in high school because I liked it. I thought I was good at it. I thought I had something that, I thought I had something I could do, I could offer. And it was a steady paycheck, and that was always nice. I didn't want to drag my kids through the sort of adjunct wandering that often comes with the beginning of a academic career. So I wrote in the margins of my life. I wrote. I'm lucky to have a wife that I love and like to spend time with, and my kids were, we did different. I like to do stuff with them, and so I wrote in the margins of my life, which meant that I wrote in little chunks. And what I ended up doing was sort of stitching the chunks together. And I would go from, my first 3 books were written sort of simultaneously. And I would go back and forth between, when there was some juice, when I felt like, oh, okay, I got something going here, I would work on it. And then when I was sort of felt like, oh, I'm not sure what to do next, then I just jumped to another book. And for me it worked out. It became a process that actually I kind of, I think kind of works for me.
When I teach fiction workshops at the university, every day the first day I talk about a conversation that you and I once had, in which you told me that coaching basketball is a matter of telling somebody, no, don't stand like that. Nice shot. And then we talked about, like, that's what teaching fiction is like, is that you don't stand like that unless you can make the shot, and that whatever advice you have goes out the window.
But if you can make the shot, then stand however you want.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And so what do you, this is actually a current obsession of mine, because young writers often like to talk about craft and craft talk and mechanics, and do you think about that stuff when you write?
Yeah, I do. I think it's more like having a devil sitting on my shoulder. I used to have a cat who I swore would bite me whenever I used an adverb, because I hated adverbs, and the cat knew that.
I remember your hatred of adverbs.
Oh, yes.
You once said, line them up against a wall and shoot them.
Shoot them all, you know. Adverbs, I think adverbs are the cholesterol of language. And I tend to, it's to the point now where there are just several sort of red flags that come up when I'm writing. And they all really are, they end up, I mean, it sounds like, you know, I'm a grammar freak, but they really end up affecting the flow of language. Anytime I can get rid of helping verbs, they're gone. Anytime I can use a transitive verb, a verb that has an object, it stays. And I'll rearrange sentences in order to do that. ING verbs, I'll do. I mean, they have to pass several tests before they can stay in a sentence. Participial phrases, they're really a problem, you know. And it sounds like I'm this grammar freak, but what I'm really looking for is just a clean line. And those are things that, for me, tend to muddy the line. You know, and I'm not saying that every sentence should be 5 words long. I think a 250-word sentence is beautiful, but it shouldn't have 251 words in it.
So I'd love to talk about language with you, because your language is so beautiful, and it runs the realm between, there's a line in the first pages of this that's so simple and perfect that they listen to the beer lights tick. And there are many examples of these sort of perfect, descriptive, very simple sentences, and then longer, muscular prose. The last page of this book is just incredible and beautiful. And how much of that comes as you're composing, and how much of that is editing? Like
a lot of it's editing. For me, it has to do with my ear and what it sounds like, and that's why, you know, I have the feeling about adverbs that I have is they don't sound musical to me. And sometimes music is just a drum beat, you know, it's not something tremendously lyrical. But, excuse me. So I would say that comes from sitting down and reshaping things and reading things and trying to say, we both had a teacher named Albert Gerganis, who was one of the really great teachers of writing. And one of the things he used to say is, don't put pearls before swine. And what he meant was, don't edit a sentence that might not be in the final draft. And so what that did was cut me loose to sort of turn myself loose, and then you come back and you say, okay, now, what part of this craziness are we gonna keep? What are we gonna get rid of? What are we gonna add? And so I suppose that got me to that kind of inspiration, I suppose, moved me to take care of sentences as sort of the final touch. And I admit to being addicted to sentences. My son, who's a wonderful poet, says that. He says, you just like sentences. The only reason you have paragraphs is because people want to see it break once in a while. He said, one of his I'll tell you maybe the condensational language, which is, he mentioned that I think he wrote a poem called, and it was a very short poem. It's, the whole poem is "The Fish Have Vision Too." And I asked him, well, why do I like this poem and why does it not seem short? And he said, because you're looking and the fish are looking. And he was right. And a short sentence doesn't necessarily have to be brief, if it contains something potent.
So we had another teacher in common, but not at the same time, Frank Conroy, who always loved to quote Holbert and say, live like a bourgeoisie so you can write like a revolutionary. And you were mentioning Holly and your family, and you had this close and lovely family life, which is not necessarily reflected in your fiction, if I may say. That the families is intensely important in your work. And it's sort of about the chaos of family and the damage that you can do to each other because you love each other. And I besides the fact that it took we graduated from grad school in 1990, and you've published 3 books now in the past 5 years. And I know you have been working all of that time. And because when I teach, I'm always trying to tell my students the importance of work. This will get around to an actual question. I'm interested in how you have arranged your life to work, and how your life with your family has had an effect on the kind of fiction you work. Not just being able to write it, but how it's worked its way into the fiction that you do write.
Yeah, I think those are two different, I have 2 different answers to that question. One has to do with family, and we were talking about, Raymond Carter wrote an essay called Fires, which is about his strongest influences, and he said family was his strongest influence because he spent most of his time trying to get away from them. And when I was in graduate school, we read the essay, and one of the few students who had a family was just apoplectic about it. Well, number one, how could you think this? And number 2, even if you thought it, how could you write it? And it's something I thought about for a long time, and then we started to have a family, and my experience is not only how could you think it or how could you write it, but that it's not true. That having a family, multiplied my experiences. It multiplied my, I used to say that, when I had my first child, algebra turned calculus. And it was interesting, and there were lots of answers I didn't know, but I was on a different level. So I would say family in that way really fed my experiences. But historically, that's another story. Luckily my dad and my mom really attempted to be good parents. But they didn't have much, especially my dad didn't have much help. My dad's father was murdered by my dad's grandfather. And so my dad really didn't have, from 9 months old, he was, his male influences were country music at work. And so as a result, he had cultural sort of signposts for what it meant to be a man. And they weren't tempered by experience. And I didn't fit those signposts, I wasn't really interested in how to adjust a carburetor. And, so as a result, I felt kind of outside of that, I felt, unmale and dysfunctional in some ways. And, I don't think my dad meant for me to feel that way. He just didn't know any other way to conduct himself. As far as that went, he didn't have any help. So I would say a lot of the difference between my wife Holly and my experiences, and she sometimes has to rein me in, because my experience is I want my family life to be different than what I grew up with. And she wants her family life to be similar to what she grew up with, because she grew up with a nurturing family. And so sometimes she says, "You're being unreasonable, Bruce." I say, "Yes, but who else can I be unreasonable with, dear?"
Do you want to see if there are questions from...
You guys have questions? Come on. Do you want me to read a little more?
Yes, please.
Okay. This is how Andre, one of the brothers, met the woman who would become his wife. Her name is Claire. They worked together in a high school, and faculty meetings, Andre tarried until Claire entered the room and then hunted a seat behind or across from her. Making notes, she employed a pencil, but she didn't erase. Instead, slashed through the words and scribbled on. She whispered as she perused handouts, a habit common to reading teachers. Her high cheekbones and narrow jaw pinched her mouth in a pretty way when she spoke, and her nose remained out of matters, which is the best one could say of a nose. Her chestnut hair was cut to her shoulders. It curled when she rose early enough to use an iron, and lay straight when she did not. She was appealing either way. Andre longed to say so and save her the trouble. Nights when he climbed far enough into the bag, Andre would press his hands together as if in prayer and undo them until his palms separated and he could conjure her face between. He had encountered prettier women, but none that made him ache so clearly for a life other than his own. After the time change, the evenings grayed early, and from a quarter mile behind, a distance enough to argue denial or coincidence, Andre began to trail Claire to her duplex 2 hills behind the school. She marked themes while she hiked the incline, chewing a red pencil between notes, and didn't divert her attention even while she unlocked her door. Soon, despite cold winds or spitting snow, Andre lingered in an alley's shadows where he could view Claire's front window. Evenings, she often halted before the glass to gaze at passing cars or her neighbors exercising their terror. She typically changed to a t-shirt and sweatpants. Her hands clawed her hair like she'd had a nap or been stirred from a book. Seeing her embarrassed him, and he pitched his eyes away down the hill where the house roofs below collided geometries. A month into his vigil, he wrapped a meatloaf sandwich for his dinner and ate comfortable until Claire gullywonked him from behind with a 2-foot icicle. His stunned skull sang like a tuning fork as Claire's soap smell passed, so simple it seemed impossible. He lay bleeding until a police tumbling lights approached. A cop's flashlight wand striped the dumpster where he'd taken refuge. Andre stood and hoisted his hands. "What are you surrendering over?" the cop asked. His name was Marcus Pop, and he was 2 years behind Andre in high school. Answering to him was one more injustice. You decide, Andre said. I'm not up to it. The cop wagged his light at Andre's cleft scalp. You know the woman in that building? Yes. You gonna fight me? The cop asked. A minor tavern legend of regulars, in a scrap Andre accepted blows without regard and offered his own until he grew too tired to lift his hands. Recently, he pinned an ironworker's ears to his skull with a stapler. While the men attempted to claw the staples out, Andre splattered his nose and uprooted his front teeth with a handle. The Honyaker was new to town. No one local or sober had tried Andre for years. I'm not inclined to fight with you, Andre said. Okay, the cop replied. By then, Claire had pulled open her door. Oily light from inside spread across the snow-blanched yard. She proceeded in slippers toward them. You, she said. Andre nodded. You deserve to be hit. I know it. The cop didn't move. He was enjoying himself. Claire's brow creased and she blinked. The blood bank took a pint, and Andre guessed he'd leaked nothing less. It warmed his cheek but froze in his hair. I did that? Claire said. Andre shrugged. Head wound, he said. They always bleed worse than they are. The cop signed Andre into the hospital emergency desk and then suggested he review his manners. He saw no need to cuff him or offer him Miranda. Andre had not even made a successful crime of it, which demoralized him further. Despite much study, Andre had not acquired the element most necessary for romance in this world. The capacity to appear detached in a tragic and compelling manner presses a woman to discover why. Instead, women saw Andre as plain country, a flat lot on a town road like any other. An abundance of heart and a scarcity of self-regard served him poorly. But a man suffering such who hadn't swallowed a gun barrel was likely not just dirt and rock and scrub. An hour later, the doctor knit Andre's eyebrow with 15 stitches and sheared half his scalp so he could add 20 more. Andre listened to the scissors snip and contemplated the 4 miles home. He could phone Smoker, but only after assembling a tale that justified his injuries. He narrowed the possibilities to brawling Californians or a slow-moving 4x4 on the icy streets by the time the hospital reached him and he found the exit. Local urchins had shot out the parking lot lights with pellet guns, and so Andre didn't recognize Claire's approach until she was too close for escape. Should I be flattered? Claire asked. Or were you just in it for an eyeful? I hope you're not armed, Andre said. She reversed her jeans pockets to demonstrate she was no danger, but there was still the jacket, so Andre steadied his feet and loped for town. 20 yards and frozen sidewalk spilled him to all fours. Claire's hand hooked his elbow and steered him up. I'll see you home, she said. In her car, Andre pointed toward the trailer court, but Claire traveled another direction and parked at a stop and go. Inside, she brought tall coffees, which left Andre the prospect of bearing his embarrassment both awake and sober. Claire dipped her face into her cup, and while Andre waited for the cream to cool his own. Our first date, she said. This isn't a date, he told her. Why not? Because if it was, I'd be worried about getting kissed at the end. Claire arched her eyebrow, then bent across the emergency brake. Their lips clobbered bluntly, and Andre lost a good share of his coffee in his lap. Scalded, he gasped, and his legs straightened, which scuffed his scalp against the roof. He put his hand to the wounds, but the stitches seemed to hold. Claire retreated to her seat. She tipped herself over the steering wheel, and her hands latched her knees. The long hair clung to her ring finger, the other end twisted in the heater's exhaust. Light through the window flickered in the strand. Andre extended his finger to touch it. Claire hurried her hand away, then changed horses and plunked it in his. I'm sorry, Andre said. I'm not accosted. Me neither, Claire told him. Please don't think I am. Claire fit a straw through her coffee top. The radio played a commercial, but Andre couldn't make out what for. I never saw you close to naked, he said. Claire gazed out the windshield. The market lights made the snow more starry than the sky. I went home early, before 8 always. You scared me as always. Claire joined their hands and stroked a finger on his split hairline. He winced. I used to pinch my brothers until they'd bleed, she said quietly. I guess I have a mean streak. She returned her hand to the shifter ball. Her fingers tapped the enamel. She wanted them to doctor her. You spied on me in school, she said. Yeah, I guess I'm none too sly. Someone else pointed it out to me, Stack. Stack Edwards was in charge of PE and wore t-shirts even in winter. Andre hadn't seen them as much as sit together. Claire took Andre's hand in hers and then raised them both. He didn't like public displays of affection. Their coffee depleted, Andre excused himself to refill the cups. A Williams girl tended the till. She had a Gabby bent and the line went 3 deep. And when Andre returned, Claire's eyes were closed and her head rested on the window. The temperature dropped near zero, a hard freeze that would require ranchers like his father to axe creek beds to water stock. A yellow mongrel crept from beneath the street light. Her steps rasped the still air like a sawyer's saw. She paused to sniff an empty can, and her ribs fluttered. For a moment, she eyed Andre, then vanished in the dark. Andre perched the copies on the car top. Back in the grocery, he paid for a handful of jerky and fished 5 scraps from the jar. He exited through the back door and sat on the concrete steps. Outside, Andre regarded the highway from the coulee out. He'd traveled it 100 times if once. College, returning home, Highway 2, first you hit the Air Force Base, then Reardon, then Lincoln County seat of Davenport, then Creston in the Scablands. Andre recalled 7th grade basketball, a balcony extended over one of the gymnasium's corners where the Creston team always forced the ball out of bounds, then blanketed the inbounder with their tallest player. Opponents had to bounce a pass between his legs or risk the balcony. 8 miles later, Wilbur and more wheat country, $1 Million Land. From Wilbur, you divert for the coulee through more wheat until the highway descended into the rocks. Once an ice age glacial dam near Clark Fork stopped a Montana full of water. The thaw blasted the country into a mile-wide gutter. The place looked ravaged by giants. The highway drops and the coulee walls rise and the sky becomes just a block of blue. Then you see the river, the reservoir, farther the mass of concrete that backs the Columbia into Canada. The dog whimpered in the shadows and squatted and leapt for the open dumpster. Her claws scrapped the metal, and the sound doubled in the cold stillness. Andre skidded a jerky piece across the frozen lot. The dog halted. She inched herself to the meat, sniffed, then ate. He offered her more, each closer until she arrived at his feet. Andre held out his hand and she licked them clean. A piece of him knew Claire would be asleep in the warm car when he returned, and it would be as if he had never left her, while another remained certain he would be absent, or she would be absent, and whatever had happened between them had not. Claire awoke an hour later, Andre's shoulder pillowing her cheek, her mouth wet, a line on his sleeve. Your coffee's bad, he told her. You want some more? Claire shook her head. It keeps me awake, as you can see. She yawned. Do you see anyone? Just the doctor when I'm down with something, he said. To date, I mean. Andre didn't reply. Finally, he piled the 2 empty cups on the floor into his own, then stuffed them with napkins that remained. You do, Claire said. What? See someone. Andre laughed. Claire wrapped herself in the arms of her jacket. Why are you cleaning up my car, not to go? Andre stopped. I told him to shove off because of you. Stack, I mean, Claire said. She dipped her shoulders under her coat, then offered her hand to make an end of it. Andre took it. Her skin was as smooth as when he first touched it, and his as thick. Her words were all he'd had of a woman's voice outside grocery checkers and barmaids in 2 years, and the kiss, his first not inflicted by alcohol or mistletoe since high school. The wadded napkins had unfolded inside the cup like petals on a flower, their slumping middle soaked with the dregs. He undid one and let it float to the carpet, then another until she joined him, laughing, and soon the floor was cluttered with their mess, and more when they rummaged scraps from the glove box and under the seats. And then he goes and gets drunk. Good. Any more questions?
Does the bear get raised?
No, he doesn't. He gets drunk. And then they worry about him having a hangover, so they put Alka-Seltzer in his bucket.
I was just curious, real quick. I know you were saying earlier that you don't do a lot of planning, you let your characters just sort of live and be, but you must do, I was just hoping you could speak a little bit to your character work early on, especially if you're bouncing from one project to the next. I feel like it would be easy to come up with something interesting that a character could do, and if I'm on this project, I'll have him do that, but if I'm over here, I'll just go, well, maybe she could just do it. So how do you sort of keep those in line? I just was hoping you could speak to your character work early on in the process, so that you know this is how this person speaks, this is how they behave, so they can't do what this other person does.
Sometimes that's an issue, actually. My agent accuses me of plundering from myself. Sometimes it's it's less character, to be honest, than it is a description. And you say, God, that description really gets it right. And so you forget that it's in a story, and then it appears in a book, and then it's like you forget that it's in a book, and it's like it fits somewhere else. So that's something I have to watch out for the way I work. But character-wise, I really believe in approaching things from a sort of organic approach. And maybe it's because I taught high school for as long as I did. You sit in front of a high school class and you got 30 people who are way smarter than you. And if you have any sense at all, you sort of get to know them. And they're all separate. They have things in common. But you end up seeing them as individuals. And so I think that characters work the same way for me. That the characters they're all separate because I know them in separate ways. And they respond in ways that I think are natural for them to respond. And if they don't, there's this like tuning fork in my head that says, bullshit. And I sort of have grown to trust that. Criticism is a strange thing. The criticism that I find the most accurate is the criticism that makes me feel the most defensive. Because because it's hitting a fear that I already have. And the other stuff you can say, you can blow that off. But when I feel like wounded, that's what I pay attention to.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you
so much.
Yeah, thank you guys.
You've been listening to the Skylight Books author reading series. Don't forget, you can listen to this and all of our other great podcasts at skylightbooks.com. Thanks again for stopping by, and we hope to see you soon.